Really, my question is, what do you do about it? I mean, Hitler's been dead for 80 years. Nazi Germany no longer exists. And so, true. And so I think what you're saying is you want to extinguish or at least control Ukrainian nationalism, but how? How do you do that?
Вот послушайте меня. Ваш вопрос очень тонкий.
Listen to me. Your question is very
Можно я
subtle,
скажу, как я думаю?
and I can tell you what I think. Do not take offense.
Of course.
Он, казалось бы, тонкий, он очень противный, этот вопрос.
This question appears to be subtle. It is quite pesky.
Значит,
You say Hitler has been dead for so many years,
люди, которые
80 years.
Уничтожали
But his
евреев,
example
русских и
lives on.
поляков, живы.
People who exterminated Jews, Russians, and Poles are alive. And the president, the current president of today's Ukraine, applauds him in the Canadian Parliament, gives a standing ovation. Can we say that we have completely uprooted this ideology if what we see is happening today? That is what denazification is in our understanding. We have to get rid of those people who maintain this concept and support this practice and try to preserve it. That is what denazification is. That is what we mean.
Right. My question was a little more specific. It was, of course, not a defense of Nazis, neo or otherwise. It was a practical question. You don't control the entire country. You don't control Kiev. You don't seem like you want to. So how do you eliminate a culture or an ideology or feelings or a view of history in a country that you don't control? What do you do about that?
А вы знаете, как вам не покажется странным, в ходе переговоров в Стамбуле...
You know, as strange as it may seem to you, during the negotiations in Istanbul, we did agree that we have it all in writing. Neo-Nazism would not be cultivated in Ukraine, including that it would be prohibited at the legislative level. Mr. Carson, we agreed on that. This, it turns out, can be done during the negotiation process. And there's nothing humiliating for Ukraine as a modern civilized state. Is any state allowed to promote Nazism? It is not, is it? That is it.
Will there be talks, and why haven't there been talks about resolving the conflict in Ukraine, peace talks?
Они были, они дошли до очень высокой стадии согласования позиций, сложно.
They have been. They reached a very high stage of coordination of positions in a complex process, but still they were almost finalized. But after we withdrew our troops from Kiev, as I have already said, the other side threw away all these agreements and obeyed the instructions of Western countries, European countries, and the United States to fight Russia to the bitter end. Moreover, the president of Ukraine has legislated a ban on negotiating with Russia. He signed a decree forbidding everyone to negotiate with Russia. But how are we going to negotiate if he forbade himself and everyone to do this? We know that he is putting forward some ideas about this settlement, but in order to agree on something, we need to have a dialogue. Is that not right?
Well, but you wouldn't be speaking to the Ukrainian president, you'd be speaking to the American president. When was the last time you spoke to Joe Biden?
I cannot remember when I talked to him. I do not remember. We can look it up.
You don't remember?
No. Why? Do I have to remember everything? I have my own things to do. We have domestic political affairs.
Well, he's funding the war that you're fighting, so I would think that would be memorable.
Well, yes, he funds, but I talked to him before the special military operation, of course. And I said to him then, by the way, I will not go into details, I never do, but I said to him then, I believe that you are making a huge mistake of historic proportions by supporting everything that is happening there, in Ukraine, by pushing Russia away. I told him repeatedly, by the way. I think that would be correct if I stop here.
What did he say?
Ask him, please. It is easier for you. You are a citizen of the United States. Go and ask him. It is not appropriate for me to comment on our conversation.
But you haven't spoken to him since before February of 2022.
Нет, мы не разговаривали. Но у нас есть...
No, we haven't spoken.
Кстати говоря, вот
Certain contacts are being maintained, though. Speaking of which,
про мое предложение...
do you remember what I told you about my proposal to work together on a missile defense system?
Yes.
Да. Вот можно спросить у всех. Они же
You can
все
ask all of
живы,
them.
здоровы.
All of them are safe and sound, thank God.
Бывший президент.
The former president, Condoleezza, is safe and sound, and I think Mr. Gates and the current director of the intelligence agency, Mr. Burns, the then ambassador to Russia, in my opinion, are very
Yes.
successful ambassador.
Они все свидетели этих разговоров.
They were all witnesses to these conversations.
То же самое,
Ask
если
them.
вам интересно, что ответил.
Same here. If you are interested in what Mr. President Biden responded to me, ask him. At any rate, I talked to him about it.
I'm definitely interested, but from the outside, it seems like this could devolve or evolve into something that brings the entire world into conflict and could initiate a nuclear launch. And so why don't you just call Biden and say, let's work this out?
А что решить? Все очень... всё
What's
очень
there
просто.
to work out? It's very simple. I repeat,
Есть контакты по линии там различных.
we have contacts through various agencies.
Я вам скажу, что мы говорим на эту тему.
I will tell you what we are saying on this matter and what we are conveying to the US leadership.
Боевые.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it.
Тогда можно договориться.
And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that,
Что проще?
stop.
Чё мне звонить?
What's easier? Why would I call him?
Или...
What should I talk to him about? Or beg him for what?
And what
А вы
messages do you
собираетесь
get back?
поставить такое-то оружие на Украину?
You're going to deliver such and such weapons to Ukraine? Oh, I'm afraid, please don't. What is there to talk about?
Do you think NATO is worried about this becoming a global war or a nuclear conflict?
At least that's what they're talking about. And they're trying to intimidate their own population with an imaginary Russian threat. This is an obvious fact. And thinking people, not Philistines, but thinking people, analysts, those who are engaged in real politics, just smart people, understand perfectly well that this is a fake.
Раздувается.
They're trying to fuel the Russian threat.
The threat I think you're referring to is a Russian invasion of Poland, Latvia, expansionist behavior. Can you imagine a scenario where you sent Russian troops to Poland?
Только в одном случае, если со стороны...
Only in one case, if Poland attacks Russia. Why?
Поэтому...
Because we have no interest in Poland, Latvia, or anywhere else.
Нигде.
Why would we do that? We simply don't have any interest.
Никаких интересов. Одни
It's just threat mongering.
Well, the argument, I know you know this, is that, well, he invaded Ukraine, he has territorial aims across the continent, and you're saying unequivocally you don't.
Это абсолютно исключено.
It is absolutely out of the
Не надо быть
question.
никаким аналитиком.
You just don't have to be any kind of analyst. It goes against common sense to get involved in some kind of a global war.
Глобальная война поставить на грань.
And a global war will bring all humanity to the brink of destruction. It's obvious.
Вот. И есть, конечно, средства.
There are certainly means of deterrence. They have been scaring everyone with us all along. Tomorrow Russia will use tactical nuclear weapons. Tomorrow Russia will use that.
Страшно
No, the day after tomorrow. So what?
выбить из налогоплательщиков
In order to
США
extort additional money from US taxpayers and European taxpayers in the confrontation with Russia in the Ukrainian theater of war.
как можно.
The goal is to weaken Russia as much as possible.
One of our senior United States senators from the state of New York, Chuck Schumer, said yesterday, I believe, that we have to continue to fund the Ukrainian effort or U.S. soldiers, citizens could wind up fighting there. How do you assess that?
Это, это провокация.
This is a provocation, and a cheap provocation at that.
Американские солдаты должны воевать.
I do not understand why American soldiers should fight in Ukraine. There are mercenaries from the United States there. The bigger number of mercenaries comes from Poland, with mercenaries from the United States in second place and mercenaries from Georgia in third place.
Безусловно.
Well, if somebody has the desire to send regular troops, that would certainly bring humanity to the brink of very serious global conflict. This is obvious. Do the United States need this? What for?
Национальной территории. У вас нечем заниматься.
Thousands of miles away from your national territory.
На границе полно. Проблемы
Don't you have anything better to do?
с государством.
You have issues on the border, issues with migration, issues with the national debt, more than $33 trillion. You have nothing better to do, so you should fight in Ukraine?
Понимая ситуацию, которая складывается.
Wouldn't it be better to negotiate with Russia? Make an agreement, already understanding the situation that is developing today, realizing that Russia will fight for its interests to the end?
Здравому смыслу.
And realizing this, actually return to common sense, start respecting our country and its interests, and look for certain solutions.
Кажется, что это гораздо умнее.
It seems to me that this is much smarter and more rational.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have? I did not blow up
То есть
Nord
у вас-
Stream.
у
Thank
вас-
you, though.
У вас лично, может быть, есть алиби. У вас лично.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Я-
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
Вы знаете, я не
You know, I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested. But in this case, we should not only look for someone who is interested, but also for someone who has capabilities. Because there may be many people interested, but not all of them are capable of sinking to the bottom of the Baltic Sea and carrying out this explosion. These two components should be connected. Who is interested and who is capable of doing it?
But I'm confused. I mean, that's the biggest act of industrial terrorism ever, and it's the largest emission of CO2 in history. Okay, so if you had evidence, and presumably given your security services, your intel services, you would, that NATO, the US, CIA, the West did this, why wouldn't you present it and win a propaganda victory?
В войне пропаганды очень сложно.
In the war of propaganda, it is very difficult to defeat the United States, because the United States controls all the world's media and many European media.
Европейских.
The ultimate beneficiary of the biggest European media are American financial institutions. Don't you know that? So it is possible to get involved in this work, but it is cost prohibitive, so to speak.
Мы можем
We can simply shine the spotlight on our sources of information, and we will not achieve results.
планировать так ясно, что
It is clear to the whole world what happened, and even American analysts talk about it directly. It's true.
Yes, but here's a question you may be able to answer. You worked in Germany, famously. The Germans clearly know that their NATO partner did this, and it damaged their economy greatly. It may never recover. Why are they being silent about it? That's very confusing to me. Why wouldn't the Germans say something about it?
Ну, меня это тоже удивляет.
This also confuses me. But today's German leadership is guided by the interests of the collective West rather than its national interests. Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the logic of their action or inaction. After all, it is not only about Nord Stream 1, which was blown up, and the Nord Stream 2 was damaged. But one pipe is safe and sound, and gas can be supplied to Europe through it. But Germany does not open it. We are ready, please.
Но Германия же не открывает его.
There's another route through Poland, called Yamal Europe, which also allows for large flow. Poland has closed it, but Poland packs from the German hand. It receives money from the pan-European funds, and Germany is the main donor to these pan-European funds. Germany feeds Poland.